context, it would be the equivalent of hypocrisy, where one teaches one thing but does something else. There is a in-structured hypocrisy. Everyone is a criminal. Everyone, if necessary, can be taken out of the context of the governance, and if individualized, he did a crime. It is the way to control that a public figure can be held accountable for his actions or her actions if it is not according to the dictate of the deep state, the powers that be, the decision makers, the hard-nosed people who are prepared to make consequences happen in order for their will to be materialized. It is this systemic corruption or systemic conditioning of efficacy of a person's actions on them doing what, that they will not be held accounted by a power that demands of them a price. It is this interdependence on these powers that we do not know, that they may be individuals, or they may be corporations, or that they may be financial systems, or they may be even artificial intelligence systems. We do not know what they go. However, a system that creates that where people must be corrupt in order to be in their positions is deeply problematic. This exists in the West equally. A good example of this are lawyers who, in their function as lawyers, lie. They misrepresent. They forge. They pretend. They bear false witness. They break the basic rules of the municipal of the judicial system, and it is on the basis of this that the entire Western, what has become now the tail of the Western legal system, is an adversarial system where one must find the problem in the other, so that the government in an adversarial system, by its nature, will want to find a problem with its adversaries, and that can be the citizen, or that can be anybody. The adversarial system, which is not based on justice, but based on the presumption that if one is critical, one will find the problems. And if one is critical, then one can find many problems. But this does not give justice to our abilities today to be much more accurate. Instead of poisoning an entire field, one can be accurate to identify the weeds. So there is no justification for this broad-handed devastation of a whole ecosystems of human populations and ideas and ambitions. What may have been necessary in earlier periods of time to rule is no longer necessary. The adversarial system, whilst it was efficient, because if someone was innocent, the adversarial system would be a mechanism to establish their innocence. Today, innocence and guilt can be produced in other means, and we do not need to go through the terrible dress down of individual rights and liberties and the basis of what it is to be a modern human. It is not required anymore. The presumption that people today, the example in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his corruption case, he, as a democratic leader, is required to have followers, to rally popularity, to have friends, to engage with many different interests, to exchange interests, to exchange interests in many and varied ways. That is the democratic game. So in the democratic game, it is now considered to be illegal to exchange favors for popularity. It is creating a situation which is described like I described in China, that everyone is doing something wrong. Everyone is a sinner. Everyone has to fear that maybe they have something that they should hide. It is creating a nation who have inner feelings, secret feelings, feelings that they cannot share because they're afraid that they will be persecuted. This is a very dangerous new condition which has not necessarily been experienced in the same dimensions that is now being experienced, that everyone must be dual or multiple personalities. This will create a dissonance, a cognitive dissonance in society, which its effect might pay off in the next decades. It needs to be remedied. It is a flaw in the system. It is a flaw in administration of populations. The era of corruption in government is due to end. There is today no justification. There's no reason. It's unnecessary. It's so cheap to have good and effective governance using electricity. The alternative is a new type of election and a new type of leadership. And it is that I will discuss in other talks, and how to herald in a new era of governance and autonomous, individual, highly synergetic, highly imaginative, highly functional, and a new era of social cooperation and universal cooperation. And we'll talk about that. I was asked if I have any particular solutions, and I am working on this solution. I believe that it is a matter of an application, a government application. The government should have already done it. The deployment of artificial intelligence, not for the purpose of tax collecting or the purpose of surveillance or the purpose of police work, but for the purpose of solving people's problems. If Facebook would have set up a digital governance, then it could have been a very successful political party. The use of an application to, first of all, collect personal data, but also to protect the personal data. Not to protect the personal data for the company, but to protect the personal data for the individual. To then collate and cross-reference and use the data over many platforms throughout the government department. So the government department is or services understand that there are multiple situations that people function in. And when there are multiple situations, there can also be multiple injuries. So that when the government department is dealing with one thing, there is no point if it deals with it in a certain way if another government department is dealing with something in another way. Because whilst they're both giving lip service to serving to public service, they are actually multiplying and compounding the injury on citizens by not being aware of the issues and not being honed into or individually service-oriented. But there is no headway in developing these techniques because, frankly, there is no motive. The motive of liberating citizens from the yoke of governance does not exist in governance itself. The necessity to put in a lot of resources to construct, to create an architecture where individuals can interact with individuals on the other side of the world or on the other side of the country or on the other side of the building or on the other side of the house or on the other side of relationships, complex relationships. There is no incentive, because the incentive is in groups or in companies to be the proxy, to be the agency, to have a license to collect money for that service. The tollway for education, the tollway to find solutions for one's problems is as illegitimate as a tollway to breathe. To breathe, to drink water, to have an education, to be entitled to the freedoms of congregation and expression. These are liberties that humanity has learnt to cultivate as the platforms on which it grows into the remarkable entity, network, society that we are. This cannot be for sale. My advice to the large corporations, the social media corporations, and even to Microsoft, where a lot of rumors are going around about the intentions of these large companies and whether or not they intend to enslave society rather than to assist society. My advice to these large corporations is to give them away, to give them to society, to give them to citizenship, to create a foundation in which citizens are all part and have trust. It is to coordinate the emergence of these large, very large and influential institutions, that they should no longer be private, but they certainly should not be government, but rather a structure put in place where they are given to the people in a highly democratic, highly individualized, highly protected way. This could be a great gift of those generals of industry to humanity.
Hey, we're back with Professor Avrum Ehrlich.
The question is, what wisdom does one draw from in order to navigate uncharted oceans? In the time of where nothing like this has been done before, where does one look as an axial type of thinking? And I feel that the ideas of the rabbis, which in turn reflected the previous ideas expressed in biblical thought, which in previously reflected ideas expressed in earlier Babylonian and Sumerian and Egyptian history and culture. So these are the layers of psychological layers which are drawn from in order to see the direction. Now, the direction does not mean that one does not pivot, and in fact pivot completely to catch the backdraft of another occurrence. And this may be necessary too. In digitalizing civilization and one's values, there is going to be a lot of differences of opinion. And in fact, the differences of opinion as there are different people and unique finger imprints. The question is how to collaborate and to measure the differences, and to do so, a new type of measurement is required. A measurement that is not structured and founded in the dollar bill, or in gold, or in silver, or in commodities which are tradable as entities which accept a value on behalf of something else. But a new type of thinking about the exchange of value, of our worth, of personalities, of abilities, of perspectives, of the tools that we wish to build in our theatre of experience and expression. My proposal to measure problems and to measure the projects, the imagination of the group, is to take every problem and to ascribe it with 10 people of any choice that that person has within their imagination, within their knowledge, within their ability to research. 10 people. And the emphasis is on 10 and on people as the humane backdrop and recessed influences towards a problem, so that empowers humanity and creates a concentric structure around human and around social needs and around solving problems, that the entire structure of our experience is around eradicating our problems and then achieving our group wills and rewarding the structure in doing so. The methods of rewarding people and humans and civilization is really an experiment over the last 10,000 years of conscious human development. We have been rewarded if our crop succeeded, or if we were able to grow our herds, or if we were able to win a war, or if we were able to migrate safely across rivers or over famine-struck countries. Creating a reward structure for the 21st century until the 24th century, for hundreds of years, where people can build wealth around the group imagination, is the need of the time. It is not necessarily in Bitcoin, although Bitcoin and blockchain and the mathematical structures that allow for the graphizing of the resources of humanity is a good idea, but it needs work in order that this pre-structure is geared to serve humanity as a priority, and that future AI entities would be trained on the basis of this early inputted structure to serve the basic needs of the human group and skills and resources as we go into the next centuries.
Moses stands before a blessing and curse. A transition into a new world. And we are told that there will be struggles for an unknown amount of time until humanity emerges into a glorious period of harmony. And surely enough time has gone by. And humanity has achieved so much that we must say it has come. However, how does that speak to the poor and the betrodden and the lonely and the helpless of our day? And much of that exists. It is the ability now to achieve in a logistical way everything that the vision turns its attention towards. It now, in the 21st century, can be achieved. And it is that precipice that the readers of the 5 books of Moses see in Moses, the precipice between civilizations and the equipment which one needs to see and be inspired. And he puts forward a blessing and a curse. And I would argue that blessing and curse has already happened. There's been blessings and there have been curses. But today there is, and he had a message after that of the regulation, the self-regulation, the tithes. That people would give up tithes and their communities would regulate their own fruits, and that there would be a form of community, but not necessarily community next to you, but rather community of boutique, related, associative. And the number in which that association took place happened to be the tithe, the 10, the association of 10, and that society has different components to it and variations to it and proportions, just like the calendar requires holidays, a rest from the things that you do through the calendar, and the markers of the calendar of actions and constructed within infinity. So too, this is part of the structure of the universe. So that the counter-claim to the blessing curse was a structure of tithing and self-regulations and of the Levites being a form of artistic expression and alternative expression, and the Sabbath being an alternative expression of the days of the week, and even opposite expressions, that it would, within it would be include an opposite effect, a counterclash, the ability certainly for reform and changing direction. And that it seems to be a counterclaim to blessings and curse, that structure of organisation. However, I would also go even further to say that we are at the cusps of an entirely different era after Moses. That in one hand, the tenacity of a person like Moses needs to be understood, what he was trying to achieve in terms of organization of humanity around laws and the conception even of language and the combination of language towards laws around which the entire civilization was able to create logic and sensibility from. So going forward, what is the great vision? And I would say that whilst the idea of 10, I feel should not be used in terms of limiting a person like it may have been done in a biblical time, but quite the opposite. That it would expand the capacity of individuals to access an incredible amount of information using artificial intelligence. within the proportions of 10. That means within the proportions, let's say, of our fingers, because presently the information at hand is being used by large corporations and beyond the capacity of a normal person to be able to, it is too great and too large for a person to be able to function within. The person, an individual, will get smattered. There is no way to navigate through. So therefore, the way forward in terms of human autonomy and towards this, in order that 10 should be the key through which no more than 10. Because if you have more than 10, a person can be confused. We only have 10 fingers. We are biologically trained to, over millions of years, to function within a coordinated space of 10 fingers. So that information shouldn't be too much more than 10. And in this reading, in the book of Deuteronomy, 10, 11, 12, 13 to 15, and then later on, the very unique conception that is actually embedded into the very root of Hebrew consciousness, the idea, or the mosaic idea of Hebrew consciousness is 10, the idea of 10. Even it would appear in Abraham, what was attributed to Abraham, the idea of 10. So that this sense that on the precipice of a new age, how are we going to organize ourselves that we don't get lost, and that we don't get dumped, or we don't get confused, or we don't get shattered by systems which are greater than our ability to even comprehend? That we create a new law and a constitution that ensures the prosperity of mankind and prepares of the prosperity of all the families of earth through small integrated groups which are people-friendly, individual, and multiple character-friendly, and with a method of organization which accommodates and helps a thousand flowers bloom.
I was asked by a viewer about staying Jewish. Should they leave the Jewish religion? And my answer to that is that Judaism is a sum total of an amazing series of civilizations. And to have a sense of intactness with a protocol of behavior which has really established, has proven itself to have been a torchbearer leading the way to the achievements of civilization until this time, the Judeo-Christian ethic, combining, being so subtle and able to combine, or not only combine, but possibly to flag bear technology and the use of technology and the use of ideas via language and via churches and via the decentralization of the message, not through a postal service and not through an army, but through a church. These ideas are great. The systems in place in the psyche of Judaism are very impressive. The Sabbath, the idea that we rest, the idea that we're entitled to rest, the idea that rest is at the source of what we eventually would like, that we would like to rest all the time. The idea that to rest is actually economically more viable than to be in slavery. The idea that rest should be the sum total and the celebration of everything that one has done until then, to celebrate and to bring to the table all one's best goods and best clothing. The sacred, the rituals around prayer,
these ideas that as children one thought would be unnecessary or outdated or antiquated are actually a fabric in which memory and in which our core experiences, the way we teach, the way we think, the way we presume that an argument can convince someone through a series of logical steps, the way we use law instead of violence, the way that we administer charity and help, the way, so many ways which are embedded in Jewish civilization that it is not whether one should remain Jewish or give up one's Jewish identity. It is Jewish identity is embedded in the background of most of the world, probably not including India, not including China and Indonesia, but even China was very much influenced by Marxism, which was a product of a Jewish diaspora identity, and so that the very development of the alphabet is a Hebrew idea which uses the phonetic methodology over the visual pictorial methodology, so that these ideas are very much part of humanity. So to the question whether an individual should leave their Jewish identity, to my manner of thinking, it's very difficult to leave the identity, Jewish identity and Hebrew identity and Judeo-Christian identity and soon to be Judeo-Muslim or Hebrew-Muslim identity or Arab identity are evolving. And I would recommend that this gentleman can be part of that evolution and expanding and understanding one identity, not to be stuck in an identity moving backwards, but using one's identity in a free and celebratory way to explore and even adopt other identities if desirable. So to that gentleman, wish you a good luck in that. I was asked for my response to Jewish anti-Zionism, the Satmar and the Neturei Karta, Hasidic groups who do not look and respect the state of Israel and do not recognize the state of Israel to be the legitimate voice or a reflection of any legitimacy of Judaism. And it is fascinating to understand the worldview of these old world rabbis that had hope for an incredible society which was not corrupt, which was not bureaucratic, which was not of the mundane evil of bureaucracy and dismissiveness of a human chain of governance, but something wonderful and something meaningful and some of deep connectedness and spirituality and service of something on high. Whatever it is that they tried to conceptualize, they did not want to put their destiny into the hands of a political bureaucracy. They held out for something better. The question is, from a mystical, from a deeply religious and spiritually committed perspective, can we see in technology and in artificial intelligence honed into the individual imagination, like a wheel is honed in to the chariot of the farmer carrying his crops home to his family. The individualization of technology as a form of spirituality, of religiousness, of devotion,
if one can create that as a given in the next generation of citizenry, armed with technology, imbued with a desire to create and to respect and to cooperate and to make magic using all of our abilities over borders, creating a digital currency, a method to censor, to measure, to reward, to congratulate, to recognize, to acknowledge the transfer of information one to the other. So people there is a method of trade, but not a method of trade on the difficult routes from the Himalaya, from two different mountain stretches of mountain, but over a digital course which can even the playing field for an incredible sharing of knowledge where the hurdles will be elsewhere, not in the plane of survival.
It is so curious that the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, the book of Genesis, opens up one of its first teachings was that man and woman were made in the image of God. That connection with infinity, with the very source of creation, as the very basis of the story, is really intuitive, and it is the basis of a claim that we should assert that our individuality is the very basis of human civilization, and this needs to be asserted so uncompromisingly. The burden of humanity is to decide to act in this way.
Religious communities are going to soon find that their goals are going to change, and that they may need to take up the torch of this issue, the interface between the individual and the state. And it may be sometime soon that the church, the mosque, and the synagogue and religious institutions will truly come back into vogue, fighting, struggling, but using this time the word, using articulation, using grammar, using everything that we know against the powers to dominate by the group. Even a small group, a company, an army, or a government department. The end of group dominations on individuals should be the core for all religions in the world. They have the infrastructure. They have the platform. They have the spiritual legitimacy, the true legitimacy to call the worshipper to demand their right, their citizenship in God, their individualized citizenship in God, protected by the tools, and that the management must carry out that will.
And we're back with Professor Avrum Ehrlich.
It is totally unreasonable for elections in a modern country to take place by post or by poll or by paper. It's dirty. It's long. It requires a lot of logistics. It requires a lot of volunteers. It's a distraction from the administration of the country. It is a waste of money
It is a waste of everything, and the only justification for it is that it achieves the quintessential need for the expression of the individual as regards to governance.
The digitalization of elections or of polling is just the tip of the iceberg to obviating and substituting governance with technology. And it is becoming clearer than ever that the existing bureaucracy, the existing leadership, the existing parties which are predicated on those structures will not go voluntarily. There will require at some stage a loud and resounding and definitive call from the majority of individuals. It would need to be a resounding call which would sound like a threat that if citizenry is not given their individual liberties, that there could be a rebellion. What is required is that there would be required to be a price for the bureaucrats, for the governance, if they do not release this power to the people, if they refuse to decentralize, if they refuse to allow for the automation and for the optimization of governance for the betterment of society, if they keep power in their hands for power alone to control and to dominate to the damage of citizenry, this could be perceived and should be perceived as a crime against society. These scaremongers that say that digital elections can be hijacked very simply do not take into consideration that existing elections are commonly hijacked and that the digital way of polling can be checked and cross-checked and counter-checked in several different ways using biomarkers and using GPS and real positioning and algorithms which can detect, and there can be tests and counter-tests, and it can be done in parallel to physical voting to check the correlation, which one is more accurate. But the excuse that digital voting should not be used is an excuse. And I call to the entire world to call on your governments to move to digital voting and to digital governance in the cleverest, profoundest, most accurate and ways with tests, with checks and balances to ensure that it works, with sets of reforms built into it to ensure its viability over centuries. The time is coming, nigh, where there will be required to write a constitution, a important document that will guide the use of technology over the coming centuries. The technologies which are being built now are going to remain and going to become platforms for future technologies, so that the rules, that the principles that will ensure the liberty of humanity, that will ensure that what guides all the technology is human, individual human, and problem sensitive rights to humanity. That is the agenda for every citizen in this century. You saw in the Solvulator a picture of a judge and the picture of scales, because one of the great transitions in society requires the equivalent of a judge and scales to measure. Measurement is a basic human quality. It is the basis of our understanding and our way of cognizing the world. And in our digital transition, we will need scales of many different sorts. In addition to that, the function of law in the future will be different in that it will be much like privatized medicine, or it is much like food, which we build into the materials that we put together, our bars, our cakes, our breads. They are a mixture of different synthesized vitamins and minerals and sugars and proteins that we need in order to grow. And likewise, we will do the same as we develop with our medicine. We will have our drugs and our stimulants and our age mitigating agents. And likewise, we will need judgment, that we will need direction, like we need the psychological guidance, or we need ethical counseling, or we need parental insight, or we need feedback from friends, to understand how to play the game, to understand how to master oneself, to know how to cooperate and collaborate with other people, or to learn skills and to do so together. We will need an arena, and in that arena we will need a judge or a referee. So not a judge which we are whipped, or we are punished, or we must pay fees and lawyers and representation and humiliation and where it is costly and inefficient, but rather referees where swiftly and seamlessly and orderly and with encouragement and with the correct amount of prosecutory deterrence if necessary. But I don't see that it should be necessary. I feel that prosecutory adversarialism in the existing legal system is much like what people did to their children when they hit their children, thinking that it was correct to do so in order to discipline them. There is no longer a need for the adversarially prosecutorial discipline of states and of the judiciary. The need today is in the fine administration, the careful and gentle and thoughtful and insightful and future-looking, using complex, intuitive, AI, general intelligence-driven tools to guide humanity for best outcomes. So, what you saw there, the icon for a judge, is a 21st century judge, and it is not human. It is AI-driven. Not for naught does the book of Deuteronomy state, justice, judges, and police thou shalt put in all your gates. The word for gate is sha'ar, and it can be played to mean eser, 10. But the idea of gate is accessibility. Just as the gates of the city, just as Jerusalem had 12 gates to its city, so too justice is administered as greatly and as far and as wide as possible.
Hey, we're back with Professor Avrum Ehrlich.
These times are truly unusual, and there must be a name for it. Ray Kurzweil predicted the singularity, the time where computing would radically change and technology would radically change humanity. And many religions predicted the messianic coming, the first coming, the second coming, and many variations, the resurrection of the dead, nirvana. The variations and interpretations of this great period of time are... Even physicists talk about the world expanding and expanding and expanding till it no longer can, and then perhaps collapsing into a collapsed star and then starting again. This process of expanding, corroding into nothingness and then starting again seems to have themes within history, within our past, and within humanity, and within the cycles of energy. And it seems these days are at the end of a cycle, the end of the last cycle, the cycle of bureaucracy, the cycle of great growth, rapid growth of humanity, where groups are huge and unbridled, hard to control, and systems are eating and oppressing and corroding and burdening each other. And at this period of time, one wonders what is upon us and what can come next. For all processes and decision processes require names and the structures that name provide in order to carry them through. And this period of time requires names, and it requires associations. And the name that can be given to this period of time, and that should be given to this period of time, I would say specifically right now, is the age between the old and the new. Between what has been a mixed bag of incredible achievement and also terrible burdens and wars and tragedies, which are now seem to have been sorted through, but finally there remain problems that need to be ironed out so that we as humans could be beneficiaries of these incredible times. And that twilight, that transition process, how it is going to occur into the singularity, or until the redemption, or into nirvana, that transitional process too, as we are in it, requires a name and meditation on it and what it is. And I believe there is a specific name that the Bible has given to these periods of time. And in the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, it reads, "And you shall count 7 years of Sabbaths, 7 years times 7 times. They shall be for you days of the Sabbath, but of years, 49 years. And you shall pass the shofar in a call on the 7th month of the 10th, on the Day of Atonement. You shall pass the shofar throughout your land, and you shall make holy the 50th year, Shana, Ukaratem, and you shall call Doror, freedom, Va'aretz, in the land, to all its inhabitants. The Jubilee it shall be to you, and you shall return each person to his estate, and each person to his family you shall return." Jubilee is the year of the 50th year. It shall be to you not to plant your
lands or to collect your crops in heaps or at the corners. It is a jubilee. It is holy, it shall be to you. Of the fields you should eat, of what is there. In the year of the Jubilee, in this year of the Jubilee, you shall return, each person, to his estate.
Calling the Jubilee in this year 2020 not only fits to the calculations of the rabbis as the genuine date of the Jubilee that had not been counted since the 10 tribes of Israel were exiled from the homeland, and they could not be called all the inheritance of the land to celebrate the Jubilee. But today, in this year, 2020, in a unique period of time where the bureaucracy has become so great and the situation with institutionalization is so burdensome, it is a perfect time in the age of Corona to call a Jubilee, to forgive the debts of the entire country, to let people go from the the clutches of the banks and the financial institutions on people, to free people, to give them the tools to become independent, to give them the tools of technology that they can ensure their income, and to call a Jubilee for a transition point, the beginning of a transition point for humanity, for this country to merge from the surplus that it had, which was burdensome because it was not used properly, to a time that can be fully optimized for human benefit, and can very well be a Jubilee, the Jubilee and the beginning of our redemption.
I was asked about what my vision is for the Middle East, and I wrote an article in the Jerusalem Post almost a decade ago on the cooperation between the Middle Eastern countries to rebuild Gaza like a Shanghai on the Mediterranean or a Singapore. And certainly it could be one of the most beautiful and remarkable cities of the new Middle East, and a hub of the Mediterranean basin. The relationship between Israel and its Mediterranean neighbours now is better and better, and that will can open up incredible opportunities. The possibility for a canal from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, providing competition and providing access between the two different parts of the continent. And it could be an incredible infrastructure project between Israel and Saudi Arabia and Oman and India and China, so that a vision for peace in the Middle East is lacking no imagination. There are many prospects.
Asked what my vision for the Palestinians are in Judah and Samaria, in Israeli territory, I would say that just like in the historic books where eventually our nations married each other, that may eventually happen, just like the Canaanites and the Philistines and the Jebusites and the other nations integrated into Israel and just as the entire 12 tribes of Israel, so to speak, integrated and became Jews.
so too there may in the next 100 or 200 years be an assimilatory process, and that may even happen in the entire Middle East, that maybe our boundaries will be broken and maybe we will see the children of Abraham truly as a family that one can intermarry. I don't know to what extent that will happen, because there is something virtuous and something very interesting about small families and tribes, and the way that information of the infinity is filtered through small groups and communities and through identities. I think that this is really the uniqueness and the networks of small groups is actually the truly brilliant nature of humanity, and one should cultivate the small groups and not try to create large entities and empires, but rather small, quality, highly dynamic within their own limits and rules.
I think the important thing is to view the Hebrew civilization as an axis which can assist, if it is used as an axis, as it was over 1,000 or 2,000 years, which brought incredible achievements, and it is not rejected or preserved within the Jewish or the Judeo-Christian paradigm, but rather it is shared throughout the region. I believe that the Arab states would benefit from it. And I believe that the openness of the Arab states to doing business and to trade and to flights will invariably develop into the learning of the Bible. Bible groups. I expect that there will be a step in the future of Islam where they invite rabbis to the mosques to teach them the Hebrew Bible. And when that happens, it may be sooner, it may be later, but the 5 books of Moses is very important to the Muslim world. And when that happens, and when our psycho-structures merge in the region, sooner than later, because the Arab edge bought them by oil may be over. So better sooner that they maximize their imagination. And so that my vision for the future of the Middle East is an incredible one, of great cooperation, of historic, of biblical, of patriarchal vision. I believe it's completely doable.
Hey, we're back with Professor Avrum Ehrlich.
And in the second part of the month of Av, when the court is out of session, it is time to think about their role in society. Their role, what used to be and what should be. Because we have an idea in Hebrew civilization that the judges should be at the gates, a very localized idea of justice. The word for gate, sha'ar, is very similar. It's a play on the word eser, of 10. The idea that justice should be in multiplicity, everywhere, much like a referee system, to coordinate. And the basis of this justice should be in sentences, or a very interesting idea is in the Hebrew word for judge is the 3 letters shin, pei, and tet. Shofet, or mishpat, or justice. The shin are the teeth, lishanen, or shinaim, to repeat rapidly, to have something almost like mass-produced. knowledge which is passed down and repeated and learnt. And the pay is of the mouth, which is passed down through the mouth and through the face, form of the face of justice. And then you've got a very interesting letter, the tet. And the tet is a Hebrew term when one channels water using limestone to cement the wells over the channeling, the using of a great power, but to use it in a direction, such the use of the words and of justice, of coordinates of infinity to create order and justice and transparency and a known arena for intergroup and interpersonal functionality. That was the basis of the judges, and that also is a great expression of Hebrew civilization, where one of our formational periods was the period of the judges. The use of sentences to guide humanity is as old as the story itself, opening up plateaus and opportunities, open sesame, abracadabra, the use of words to create, let there be light. The basis of the Judaic religious experience, the guiding of neuro-linguistic channeling to create reality, has at its source judges and the legal system. And it was expected of this legal system, almost out of faith or perhaps of civilizational experience, that this would bring about the welfare of the people, as it put its libido, its destiny into words and sentences. And it was demonstrated over time and celebrated in the books of the Bible that this system seemed to work, and people were happy with it in a long term, because it called eventually for justice for all and for judges which would give that justice to all. And that was a shared, common, universal expectation, religious, spiritual. It was the quest of every person towards their ideal, the pursuit of justice. Today, the legal system is so disjointed and out of sync with the purposes of justice that it could hardly be called a justice system. And it requires rethinking of its entire raison d'etre, its reason for being. And in this month, where the court is in recess, one should think, what could be an apt replacement for the human frailties of judges and legal counsel, which use their jealousies and their personal aptitudes when applying what was meant to be neutral of these human characteristics. So what is its replacement? And then one thinks, what could be the ideal replacement? And I believe that it should be an automation. The automation of the legal system, using artificial intelligence to systemize the best practice of the law, the highest standard of the law, the equal application of the law, tirelessly, all the time, even when court is in recess.
A question from an anonymous viewer that the bureaucracy, the deep state, will not let the individual achieve the liberties that I'm talking about, and what my response to that is. I feel almost traumatized by the state's presumption of liberties in the name of the welfare of the individual, but in a clear and evidence-driven manner, often to their detriment. The entire presumption of authority is to better the individual. The equation of the individual giving of one's rights to the authority is only and solely because it was presumed that the collective giving of the will allow for the problems to be solved easier and more efficiently. But that matter of logic is no longer applicable, because problems can be solved digitally, through AI, the AGI, General Intelligence-driven solutions, without the aegis of individual bureaucrats. So that now the very power that was given to ensure the welfare of the individual is going to try to take away that person's rights, not to their betterment, but actually to their detriment, because there is a clear and presently better way of doing it, so that there is possibly a case of theft in broad daylight. A crime potentially is being committed. It is very hard to know in these circumstances of tens or 20 years, of a decade, of several types of leadership, to be able to compare what has worked and what has not worked. And it is very often historians debate over many decades what the problem and what the cause was, and then there is disinformation by different groups and proxies to confuse people what the cause of it is, all at the same time that power is being misdirected or not accurately directed. The situation is better in some countries and worse in other countries. It is going to accelerate the situation. The problem will accelerate as countries adopt uniform methodologies of dealing with mass populations. There is no great alternative other than the complete individualization, as I've already spoken about. I am putting hope in artificial intelligence tools that can be used as efficiently as the tools of state, and in that way to closen the enormous power gap between the two, so that the message of the individual can reach the powers that may then be able to legislate and to construct solutions to this problem. It is really just a matter of architecture, of group architecture. But because of the powers in government and the structures of existing parliamentary or constitutional governments, they will not necessarily cooperate for their betterment. So that the solution is in individuals and in apps and in open source and in great
like generals of governments. The generals today, the heroes, are possibly in free industries, in academia, in amongst children, amongst visionaries. The visionaries of the future are going to come from unexpected places. I am even thinking maybe they can come from the church, from the mosque, and from the synagogue. That religion can be reinvigorated with its most important mission yet, to bring to a closure the last 1,000 years of turmoil, and to vindicate and do justice to all the bitterness which has been paid in lip service, and really to bring about this wonderful change. I don't necessarily put all my eggs in the religious basket. In fact, the presumption is that the religious organizations are unable to achieve it because they are also occupied with the same problems as government. However, it would be a good thing for them to try. I believe that they would be able to take the hearts and the souls of the population and refill their seats. And if religion does not take it up, then it can be in the hands of engineers.
Relationships are funny things, and civilizations always have views and perspectives on the nature of relationships. And China and Confucius says that the relationship, that a government can only function when people fill their roles, their relationship roles within the government, that everyone acts in a certain way. The prince acts like a prince, and the master acts like a master, and the teacher like a teacher, the husband like a husband, the wife like a wife, the father like a father, the son like a son, the big brother like a big brother to the younger brother, and friend to friend. The different types of combinations of dynamics between people. It is interesting that in comparison, the Hebrew civilization looks at relationships too. The relationship between of the relationships of father and son, or parents to children, the relationship of God to humanity, the relationships of husband and wife and families, and illegal relationships between different family members, illegal sexual relationships which can be friendly but cannot be intimate. The guidance of relationships is important. In fact, one of the very first stories in the Bible of Adam and Eve, and then of Cain and Abel, show certain types of dysfunctional relationships. And in fact, the entire biblical story is about the building and the falling of relationships, the Tower of Babel, and the inability to communicate, or the attempt to communicate in one language, and then the failing to do so, and so on into statehood. The dealing with the structure of relationships is going to be very important, and the innovation, the new horizons for relationships, because today we have relationships with people all around the world in which we don't necessarily know who they are. And this can be wonderful, and this can be excellent, and we can use and share and enjoy each other for our sensory capacities and for our capacity to be in certain circumstances at a certain time, and to give inspiration and guidance
and direction to people who are not yet in those circumstances, presuming that there is some similarity or there is some connectivity in the circumstances which are lendable to others. So the construction of a platform to organize our different relationships is really a platform for our continual welfare in the 21st century. And to a question of an anonymous viewer, that is what I am working on. It is really about a digital civilization, or rather a digital utopia, to identify what the tools are that have assisted and have brought humanity to its tremendous achievements, and then to construct digital instruments of a similar nature to be able to recreate those advantages in a reconstructed digital relationship that we have with so many people. So this is an opportunity, and it requires to push back on the existing governmental powers and influences and laws, and to, over time, appoint chiefs, committees, representatives to design an ideal structure that which will eventually be a bridge for individuals to their goals and to their happiness and to their constructive and creative interactivity with each other. I was asked by an anonymous viewer whether I saw the movie I, Robot, where there was an attempt by an individual using robots to take over the world, and if that is not a scenario that we should be scared of. I answer that humans use swords, and humans use guns, and humans use software, and it is on the laws that we have at our disposal are to manage and to direct and guide and limit humans, and that is what is necessary. I don't think that one should blame the machines for the problems of humans. Stories of this nature appear throughout our histories. Jewish history has a similar story of the Golem of Prague. The word golem comes from the Hebrew golem, which is material, which is raw materials that were put together like clay to create a human, and in that raw material was put the names of God written in certain ways, in secret ways, and those names would serve like a soul to activate the clay and to create an assistant. And the story is, and there are parallels in Western and European culture, that golem, that entity, loses control, that the names of God slip out of place, are moved, are taken out, are not functional, have been wiped, have been scratched. The software is not working or has been misused. And they become the potential threat to society. And that analogy is very interesting and is very telling. So how does one mitigate the threats that could occur to humanity? It is very interesting that the Bible seems to have thought about this when the editors of the Bible, when they put the primary principle of the biblical thinking was, in the core, the relationship of humanity to God. That man and woman was made in the image of God. That relationship, that unique individualized relationship, I believe is very profound and very telling and has passed the test of thousands of years of time to remain relevant. The individual, the preservation of the individual as the core consideration of all power, even of the power of God, because God is made in the image of man, or man is made in the image of God. Man and woman is made, it is said 3 times. It is the first theology put forward in the Bible. That assertion, that protocol, that algorithm connecting mankind and womankind to the divinity. That is at the core of every future algorithm in our digital world. Certainly a constitution would need to be written, a constitution that collects all the principles of the constitutions of our great countries and civilizations to put together to ensure that artificial general intelligence and digitalization and the distancing of physical distancing of individuals will not cause the collapse of all the great achievements of our society. That all the rights and all the ideas and the best practices which have been collected through the shared experiences of humanity and societies can be brought together into a document which will become a code, a new covenant, a new testament between individuals and each other, and the shared structure of the universe that we are part of, not for the functioning of the universe, because let the universe worry about itself, but for the functioning and for the empowerment and for the liberty and for the happiness and for the flourishing and the sharing and the productivity and the replication of humanity and the growth of humanity in the most wonderful and also in the most exploratively wonderful. In other words, we don't necessarily know what is wonderful yet, but we should be open to explore thousands, millions of variations, and when one lucky person finds a good way, we will be able to learn it very quickly through our methodology. And in this way, we can truly be a wonderfully coordinated family.
With a political philosophy in mind of radical decentralization of knowledge and resources and instruments to individuals to solve their problems and empower their imaginations and their small group imaginations. One looks at those who could prevent this utopian ideal, and those who are preventing it and are likely to continue to do so are the middle bureaucracy, middle management of a antiquated system which is now out of tune, a dinosaur. They are the obstacle to swift and optimized reform because of concern for their own
welfare and jobs and positions, and they represent a 30% of the population. It is towards these people who are potentially will use the law in order to damage and to obsticate. And it is towards these that certain laws and certain mindsets require to be put into place. A law requiring the reporting, the transparency, and the marking of public servants, how they function, their optimization, their functionality, their service, and that they, as a power, need to report to the individual vis-a-vis the individual, the citizen's needs, so that the knowledge is apparent and not hidden in a exoteric cult. So that another requirement is the taking down of public officials' immunity. The immunity that public officials have, as if they cannot be answered, that they are not answerable to the citizen, is a form of it is a tyrannical. It creates a momentum that causes the citizen to invariably fail, so that immunity must be taken away from public servants, and that they must be answerable to the citizen, and in that way a system where citizens can slowly take back autonomy using the instruments of state can be achieved without the state itself being the obstacle.
A few laws, such as a public servant report to citizen law, a immunity law dependent on the functionality and the report card of the public servant, a law that requires information, an addition, a correction to the Information Act that requires that information be provided on a common platform vis-a-vis the problems of that individual, not a huge dump of information which is not pliable to the individual, so that the onus of providing the information and the service and is on the bureaucracy, so that the bureaucracy will slowly, and this is a big hope, will slowly reduce itself. And perhaps that brings to another law, the requirement of the bureaucracy to conceptualize techniques for its reduction.
The days in the calendar for the advanced human is embedded with knowledge and with association and with recessed coordinates of significance, no less so than today, the cusp of the 15th of the month of Av. The month of Av, which in Hebrew is the foundational month, and in this month is also called the month of the consoling Av, or the consoling
father, or the consoling foundation. And it is considered also on this day one of the 4 New Years. But it is a new year for faith in humanity. And it is very interesting that it comes just a few days after, historically, one of the tragic days, the destruction of the Commonwealth, the Israelite Commonwealth, which had radiated a law and a inspired message throughout the region, throughout the ancient regions. Rabbi Simon, the son of Gamliel, who was the grandson of the great Scion, the head of the assembly, the Sanhedrin, in Jerusalem prior to the temple being destroyed, he said, "There were no good days to Israel like the 15th of the month of Av and Yom Kippur." He compared this day of 15th of the month of Av to Yom Kippur as if it was a great day. Yom Kippur, the most solemn, biblically mandated law to afflict your soul and to reflect and to forgive and to request forgiveness. It was a mark on the psyche of the biblical being to be aware of the other, and as a foundation for every part of what would grow from it, the part of its holiness that would grow from it. And on the other hand, you've got the 15th of the month of Av, which is not biblically mandated. It is not found in the Bible itself, but it is described to be one of the great days of harmony and of consolation and of equality, and a rare gift to the people. What happened on this day that it could be equated with the Day of Atonement? And in these days, the children of Jerusalem would go out with their vessels or with their clothes, white clothes, which were lent from one to the other. Shelo levayesh, in order that they would not embarrass each other, that who had the better clothing. All of these, kol hakelim, all of these vessels or clothes would require washing or baptizing. Washing or baptizing. They may be dirty. They had stains on them, so that they could not be identified that they were clean or who would use them. But not Yerushalayim, and the daughters of Jerusalem would go out, mechulalot or cholot, desecrated, bikramim, in the vineyards. And what would they be saying? They said, "Lift up your eyes, boy, man, and look what you're choosing. And don't give your eyes and your attention to the decorations or to the greenery or to nature. Give your eyes to your family." This is an incredible statement of individual choice, of freedom, of autonomy, of desire, of human cooperation to allow one another to achieve one's freedoms, one's drives, what one wants, without and absolutely absent of centralized authority. And here, the grandson of the great Scion of the rabbinic dynasties compares these 2 days, the day of great centralization of a people under God, inspired to forgive and to be holy, and another one to be free and to find who one loves and to help each other with borrowed clothing, so that one could not identify that the other one may be losing their virginity in the vineyards outside of Jerusalem. That they would go and that they would find their love. And they would say, seek your family. Seek your outcomes. Seek your destiny. Seek your happiness. And this is a wonderful, wonderful celebration. And it is so curious. And I always wondered from the time that I studied this Mishnah, the 8th Mishnah in Ta'anit, at the age of 14, I wondered, why has this festival disappeared from the pantheon of festivals in Judaism and even in the world? And I always wondered, maybe something, and it looks like something, a story lies behind it. A story that has not been told by the rabbis. And a story that maybe is part of the interflowing of generations, of the knowledge that one generation may have, but another generation does not have it, or experience it, or understand it. And I wondered, even at the age of 14, whether a festival like this will ever come back into vogue and capture the imaginations of the people. A festival of freedom and of personal liberties. A wonderful and consoling festival in the month of Avrum.
Professor Avrum Ehrlich.
Spirituality is much like an algorithm. Not necessarily the best known, most traveled sequence of orders, instructions, but put together based on experience, long-term experience, and have become the forms of words, sentences, laws, injunctions, procedures, ways, norms, cultures, etiquette, the entire family of substrata that sustain social life come from these sets of coordinates. Some are unique and esoteric or exotic, and they take on the form in this greater structure as being mysterious, mystical, or spiritual. But in fact, they're in many ways like forgotten paths, overgrown routes through the back garden until the park. Ways which are clear for someone that knows. And it requires an assertion of them to be made and put together, for them to be re-established and reused and perhaps reconstructed, repaved, to be made into bike trails or electric bike trails or zone or drone landers. The method of communicating between these sets of logics can be different. It is much like the relationship between words and sentences and the actions of somebody else. One speaks and the other person understands and will do something as a result of that speech. So the conception that one person has and for their cooperation and what one says are completely different. They exist in different worlds. One is of a plan or of imagination for necessity. Another one is a set of structures, of commands to how to say it. The other one is how to listen to it and then to reconstruct it in another completely different reality on the other side with different people, even the other side of the world, because it can be done through telephone. And that then would require another set of structures, which is digital. And these, in fact, are just algorithms, sets and series. These algorithms are often come to the expression usually via sound and via hearing. And they are often read through the eyes, through sight. So there is a dance, a coordinated relationship, obviously through the millions of years of human evolution between hearing and seeing. And the structures which come out of the hearing function are long-term civilizational and creative structures, whilst the ones that result from the eye are usually short-term, strategic, technical, observational, short-term. And the combination of these two together form the great sonar of and instrument of the human brain. There is one component to spirituality which has not been emphasized, but it has always been in the back picture of the religious story, and that is the story of the angels. This curious class of existence, which is a interphase between reality and divinity, between the explained and the unexplainable. And if one looks at the intellectual heritage of our ancestors, what the angels truly meant, we look at the root word of the word in Hebrew, malach, which possibly is either a 4-letter root or two two-letter roots. And if it is a two-letter root, then the roots would be mal and ach, malach, to make the name for angel, a mal, which seems like it is the basis of the word milah, word, is also the same as the term for circumcision, the covenant of milah, the covenant of either word or to cut, to artificially operate, to a surgical intervention, a cutting, an unfolding, a intervention on the biological being using artificial tools such as a knife. This intervention and this relationship between different types of spiritualities, or the relationship between different types of beings, the artificial being of the intervention of a knife, of surgery, of technology, of meterage, of a external creativity which is not biological, with biological features such as hearing and sight, and the logicization of it through a algorithm connecting two opposite structures which really cannot cooperate, cannot maneuver together, because there is no space, there is no axes for them to maneuver. But through a process of construction in infinity, using these shadows and reflections and non-substantiated and really not connected components of reality, which are words, a cascade and a scaffolding of energy creates a pathway for a reality to flush through. And so one sees the relationship between instruments and biology is at the very core of human consciousness. And so it is not for us to reject instruments and machinery and the age which is upon us, but for us to learn how to synchronize and synthesize and celebrate it within and as a part of the human condition, just as the circumcision on our flesh.
Hey, we're back with Professor Avrum Ehrlich.
Present bureaucratic practices are redundant. They are no longer necessary. Centralized government, which expands according to the Parkinson law, just seeking to find a job for itself, is passé. The 21st century, with programming, with artificial intelligence, with the ability for artificial general intelligence, makes redundant the functions of governance as they are. And the only way forward is for governance to review itself, or to set up committees that review itself for the purpose of disestablishment and decentralization. That is the mission and the service that government can provide citizenry today. A judge in Israel will call their children on their telephone and sort out the needs of their parents or of any challenge they have immediately within 5 minutes. But for their clientele, the citizens, the people of the world, of Israel, of countries which are subject to these situations, see that whilst they solve their own problems immediately, they leave problems for the citizens which are stranded in the ripple effect, where their lives are rippling out and being taken for rides into ways that they could not dream and they cannot control because of the negligence of government. And this problem has to be solved first, before any political discussion, coalitions. The coalition of the individual towards solving their problems is the foremost issue on the agenda that cannot disappear. No political power in the world has legitimacy whilst they allow for problems to continue to citizens, which can be solved with a phone call. A phone call that they will make, for any political leader will make for the purpose of their own household, but they will not empower the system to use the same technology, the digital technology, to address individuals' problems. The problem starts with the judges of Israel and the world that must empower a platform, a digital platform, and an immediate platform as recourse for justice, a recourse for the needs of citizens that turn to the court for justice, but justice is not given because the judges and the bureaucracy and the governance and the laws are guided and structured to limit the citizens' ability to access the privilege that the leaders enjoy. Demonstrations in the street against the leaders, against the assault to human and social liberties, cannot achieve the goal because it is not identifying the true threat to the collected individual and the congregate differences amongst us. The differences that are necessary, the differences which are imperative for our development, must be celebrated. But the structures in governance pulverize, crush the individual. And understanding the dynamic in which the tools, in which the establishment comes almost as a threat to the individual and to the small group of creative peoples that want to congregate amongst themselves for their own creativity. The government, the bureaucracy, the representatives of politics must now turn their attention to complete empowerment of artificial general intelligence for the service of individuals. And if they do not do that, then they themselves are negligent. Then they themselves are the problem. They themselves are the obstacles. And they are the people that should be removed from governance to allow for a way for a different process.
To a very dear viewer, Isaac Meir Malek, love this, love you, love your mind, more please. Yitzchak, you have a beautiful mind, and the mind that empowers other people, that says good things about other people, that finds the grace in other people, is the winning mindset. And that's what I've learned, that empowerment, encouragement, a backdraft, a smile, a thumbs up, these are the values which are not counted in dollars and cents and in Bitcoin and in other measures of understanding and cognizing human value. And it is these, in this future age, it is the age of supporting, of inter-social support. And I, by no means, am saying that I am good at that, but rather the sages who saw the great changes in humanity over many different periods of time are saying that what destroys humanity is senseless hatred and criticism and whining. And what saves the world is encouragement and love, senseless love. And I am by no means a lovey-dovey person, but in every way I realize that love and support, these are the key. So thank you very much, Yitzchak. And Soraya Sylvester, thank you very much. You say, Tehillah Friedman. I believe you're saying, congratulations, Ambassador David Friedman, for your remarkable job. We in Israel have not seen such an impressive hero of the people of Israel. Your parents must be very proud. They called you David, as in the king of Israel, Melech. A king is your middle name, and Friedman, a person who have freed mankind. And indeed, for the Israeli people, you are a hero. no one recognizes you, interestingly, not on the American side and not on the Israeli side, but you will go down in history as a great man for our people. Thank you very much, Ambassador David Friedman, and thank you very much, President Trump and your team. What an amazing man you are. You said and you did. You, President Trump, are a hero. And I see here T. Johnson again. God bless Israel. There is a incredibly interesting idea in the Bible. It's where God promises those who bless Israel will be blessed. And so, T. Johnson, bless you. It is very good to thank and to bless and to praise, especially an entity which is struggling with great ideas, and the psychic and the soul of Israel is really struggling with wonderful and important ideas. So thank you very much for your encouragement. We will do our best. Thank you for your blessings, and T, bless you.
Kevin Garber, thank you very much from Sydney for your question. What do I think about the peace on earth? I think that Israel is truly well positioned to achieve peace. I think that our partners, whoever they are that join us, whether they be the Palestinians, whether they be the Persians, whether they be our enemies, if they join us, we together will achieve peace, because that is in our soul. Today, our partners is the greatest power in the world, the United States. May God bless them and strengthen them in everything they do. They are our partners to achieve peace through strength, by intercepting missiles, by creating the technology that will ensure that no one will be able to affect us and no one will be able to change our determination to do wonders in the world for the betterment of humanity. So, into your question, Kevin, about peace, we will achieve peace with our partners, with America, and now our new partner, with the United Arab Emirates, with the Crown Prince of the Emirates, Mohammed Ibn Zayed. Congratulations, Crown Prince. You have done a great thing for your country. You have done a great thing for your neighbors, and for your religion. You are now engaged with Israel and the Jewish people in navigating and finding and ensuring a peaceful and prosperous way together for our peoples and for the entire world.
Professor Avrum Ehrlich.
Spirituality is much like an algorithm. Not necessarily the best known, most traveled sequence of orders, instructions, but put together based on experience, long-term experience, and have become the forms of words, sentences, laws, injunctions, procedures, ways, norms, cultures, etiquette, the entire family of substrata that sustain social life come from these sets of coordinates. Some are unique and esoteric or exotic, and they take on the form in this greater structure as being mysterious, mystical, or spiritual. But in fact, they're in many ways like forgotten paths, overgrown routes through the back garden until the park. Ways which are clear for someone that knows and it requires an assertion of them to be made and put together, for them to be re-established and reused and perhaps reconstructed, repaved, to be made into bike trails or electric bike trails or